I became the dog of a top-tier billionaire heiress. She fed me prime filet mignon, let me sleep on her silk sheets, and when she was sad, she'd hold me and cry. The system said that if I could get her to sincerely say the words, "I love you," I could go home. So I wagged my tail, did everything I could to please her, and finally one night, I heard her murmur drunkenly, "I love you. You're all I have." Mission complete. I chose to return without a second's hesitation. I thought the absurd story was finally over, until I was crammed in my shared apartment, eating a ramen cup, and my phone started blowing up. An unsaved number sent a picture of me, taken just moments ago, with a caption, "Found you. My dog has been gone for 3 years. It's time to come home." A second text popped up immediately after. "Tell me, would breaking your legs make you behave? Or would a leash be more effective?" An icy chill shot through me. I called the number back and heard that voice I knew down to my bones, tinged with a smile as it asked softly, "Bark for me, or do you want me?" Well, my name is Leo Carter. I'm 26, stuck in a dead-end corporate job, with a bank account balance that's never broken 5 figures. My life felt like a stagnant pond. You could throw a rock in and not even hear a splash. That night, after pulling an all-nighter at the office, my head was swimming. I was at a bodega buying instant ramen when everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, I was lying on a bed so soft I sank into it. The air smelled of some expensive, cool fragrance. Then I heard a voice, soft and a little hoarse with sleep, right above my head. "You're awake." I tried to turn my head and realized something was wrong. My perspective was incredibly low to the ground, and my vision was in black and white. A pale, slender hand reached out and stroked my head. Her fingers were cool, the touch gentle. "Nightmare? You're shaking." I opened my mouth, wanting to ask who she was, where I was. The sound that came out was, "Woof," a short, deep, unmistakable bark. I froze. The owner of the hand seemed to let out a quiet chuckle. I felt the mattress dip as she leaned closer. A face entered my field of vision. I don't know how to describe that face. It was unreal in its beauty, with skin as white as porcelain and lips the color of pale cherries. Her eyes were large, the irises a light color, and they held no emotion when she looked at you, as if veiled by a thin layer of mist. But right now, behind that mist, there was a faint glint of something almost like curiosity. She was wearing a silk robe, and her long, dark hair cascaded down, a few strands brushing against my nose. It tickled. "Strange," she murmured to herself, her fingertips scratching under my chin. "You never used to tremble." My mind was a complete blank. Was this a novel? A system? Or had I finally worked myself into a psychotic break? A cold, mechanical voice echoed directly inside my head. Host consciousness integrated with vessel Fergus. Current world. Novel derived, secondary plane. Main quest issued. Obtain a sincere "I love you" from key individual Juliana Thorne. Quest completion allows for point acquisition and application to return to original world. Quest failure or vessel death will result in permanent detainment of host consciousness. Good luck, Juliana Thorne. I looked up at the face just inches from mine. So, this was the heiress, the protagonist of some novel I'd never even heard of, and the target I had to win over. And I was her dog, a Doberman named Fergus, supposedly of noble lineage and worth a fortune. Juliana seemed pleased with my silence. She didn't say anything else, just continued to stroke the fur on my back in slow, rhythmic motions. Her fingers were long and cool, her movements deliberate. I was forced to lie there, accepting the heiress's royal treatment. My head was a mess. System, quest, go home. They expected me, a living, breathing human, to act like a dog and coax an "I love you" out of some fictional character. This was insane. But that mechanical voice hadn't sounded like a hallucination. Permanent de temps? A shiver ran through me. Juliana's hand stopped. "Cold." She frowned slightly, then lifted the corner of the ridiculously expensive-looking silk comforter and tucked me. Inside, the dog was in the master's bed. Every muscle in my body went rigid. Her body heat radiated through her thin nightgown, mixing with that cool fragrance, seeping into everything. "Go to sleep," she said, her eyes closed, her voice becoming blurry. "I'll have Dr. Evans come take a look at you tomorrow." I don't know how I made it to morning. Juliana's routine was precise. She woke up at 7 a.m. sharp. She seemed a bit dazed when she first woke, her eyes landing on me, curled up at the other end of the bed. Her gaze was vacant for a few seconds before slowly coming into focus. She got up, went through her morning routine, and got dressed. The whole time, she ignored me, as if the person who'd pulled me into her bed last night was someone else entirely. I padded after her, tried to observe this new world. The bedroom was massive, decorated in a minimalist, cool-tone style. It was so sparsely furnished it felt less like a person's room and more like a luxury showroom. We went down a long hallway and a grand staircase into a ridiculously large dining room, where a single-place setting was laid out at the end of a long table. A middle-aged woman in a crisp uniform stood beside the table, her expression stern, reporting the day's schedule in a low voice. Juliana ate her breakfast in silence. Her movements were elegant, but she ate so little, it was like she was just going through the motions. She never looked at me or told anyone to get me food. I sat by her chair, my stomach letting out an embarrassing growl. Back in my world, I hadn't even gotten to eat that ramen cup last night. The silver spoon in Juliana's hand paused. Without turning her head, she said to the uniformed woman, "Mrs. Gable, give him the same thing I'm having." Mrs. Gable nodded and quickly returned with an exquisite bowl, placing it in front of me. A perfectly seared filet mignon, a puree of seasonal vegetables, and 2 blueberries. This single meal cost more than my entire week's grocery budget. I hesitated for a moment before lowering my head and starting to eat. It tasted good, almost unrealistically good. When Juliana finished, she dabbed her lips with a napkin, her gaze finally falling on me. It was a calm, almost empty look. She was looking at me, but it felt like she was looking through me at something else. "Fergus," she said, her voice flat. "Be good today." She reached out her hand. My first instinct was to flinch, but I forced myself to stay still. Her hand rested on my head, patting it gently twice. "Good boy," she said. In that moment, I had no idea what I was supposed to feel. Juliana was busy. I quickly realized my role as her pet was stranger than I'd imagined. She allowed no one else near me. Grooming, bathing, feeding, she did it all herself. When Mrs. Gable tried to help, Juliana stopped her with a single look. It was a cold look, different from Mrs. Gable's usual stoic deference. This one carried a real, tangible warning. Mrs. Gable immediately lowered her head and backed away. Juliana was meticulous when she groomed me, her fingers combing through my coat with slow, gentle motions. She wouldn't speak, but sometimes she'd just stare at me, lost in thought. Her bedroom was the only place I was allowed to stay for extended periods. When she left the house, she would lock me in. There was no TV in the bedroom, no computer, no form of entertainment whatsoever. There was only a floor-to-ceiling bookshelf filled with hardcover books in various languages, many still in their plastic wrap. And there was a massive picture window that overlooked a perfectly manicured but lifeless garden. My main activity every day became sitting by that window, staring at the unchanging scenery outside. The system never spoke again, staying stubbornly silent. So I had to wait for Juliana to come home. She never came back at a set time. Sometimes it was early, sometimes late into the night. But no matter how late, the first thing she did upon entering the house was come find me. She often smelled of alcohol, mixed with unfamiliar perfumes and an undercurrent of icy exhaustion. She would crouch down, wrap her arms around my neck, and bury her face in the fur of my shoulder, staying silent for a long time. Once, she held on so tightly I could barely breathe. I felt a dampness on my neck. She was crying, silently, her shoulders trembling just slightly. I stood rigid, not daring to move. After what felt like an eternity, she let me go. Her eyes were a little red, but her face was blank, as if she hadn't been the one crying. "They all say I'm crazy," she said suddenly, her voice raspy. Treating a dog like a treasure. She pulled her lips into a bitter smile. "Whatever." She stood up and went to the bathroom. The sound of the shower started. I remained where I was, a heavy feeling settling in my chest. Crazy. Maybe she was. To rely on a dog like this, to confide in it, to seek a small scrap of warmth from it. And I, the human trapped inside this dog's body, knew everything. But I could only watch, and even worse, I had to play along, to cater to her for the sake of my mission. It was so damn absurd. As the days passed, I started to pick up on a few things. Juliana Thorne, the sole heir to the Thorne family fortune, had lost her parents young. She controlled immense wealth, but also bore an unimaginable weight of pressure. Vicious infighting within the family, circling predators from the outside. She had no one close to her, only a world of transactions and cold calculations. Fergus, this dog, was a creature she had suddenly brought home a few years ago. No one knew where he came from. From that day on, he became her shadow, her property, a strange barrier between her and the rest of the world. She started talking to me more and more. Sometimes it was complaining about a difficult board member. Other times it was about a successful negotiation, and sometimes she would just read passages from a book aloud. Her voice was beautiful, cool, and clear without much inflection, but after a while, it had a strangely calming effect. I couldn't respond, so I could only listen, occasionally nudging her hand with my head. She would pause, look at me, and then give a soft, fleeting smile. It was brief, but it was genuine. I realized I wasn't in such a hurry for her to say I love you anymore. The thought surprised me as soon as it surfaced. Get a grip, Leo. You're a human, trapped here. Your home is on the other side. That cramped apartment, that uneaten ramen cup, that stagnant life, that's your reality. Everything here, Juliana, this gilded cage, it was all fake. It was a mission. But when she came home late again, cloaked in an unshakable weariness, and sank onto the rug as was her habit, leaning her back against my body and staring out at the impenetrable darkness, she whispered, "Today, you were the only one waiting for me." A part of me, deep down, hopelessly softened. I even felt a shameful flicker of relief. Relief that it was me here with her, and not someone or some other dog else. I started to be more proactive. When she came near, I no longer tense up but give a slight wag of my tail. When she spoke softly, I'd lift my head and touch her hand with my nose. When she seemed especially exhausted, I would move closer, letting her lean her weight against me. She seemed to notice the change. The misty emptiness in her eyes would occasionally clear, revealing something very faint, almost gentle, beneath. She started taking me out, not just into the garden, but really out to so-called high society events. I wore a custom-made collar and leash, staying close by her side. She would be in a perfectly tailored gown, her heels clicking with cool indifference on the marble floors. People would part for her, their gazes a mixture of awe, curiosity, and contempt. Their feelings about her were complicated. Their feelings about me were even more so. Juliana paid them no mind. She kept her chin slightly raised, the line of her jaw tight, with impeccable arrogance and distance. Only the hand holding my leash, its grip slightly too firm, betrayed a hint of her true feelings. Someone bold enough to make small talk tried to bring me up. "Ms. Thorne, your Doberman is truly magnificent." Juliana raised her eyes and glanced at the man. "He's shy." The man was left hanging, trying to think of something else to say. But Juliana was already leading me away, tossing a final remark over her shoulder. "Don't touch him." Her voice wasn't loud, but the entire ballroom seemed to fall silent for a moment. She protected me fiercely, or perhaps guarded me fiercely. No one was allowed to approach, to touch, or even to look for too long. I knew that in their eyes, both she and I had become symbols of some strange eccentricity. An heiress who treated her dog like a person, at odds with the entire world. A dog, overly cherished and imprisoned in a beautiful cage. In the car on the way back, she unclipped the leash and leaned back against the seat, closing her eyes, looking drained. The city's neon lights slid across her face in shifting patterns of light and shadow. I lay at her feet, smelling the faint scent of alcohol on her and a deeper kind of exhaustion. The car pulled into the estate and stopped in front of the main house. The driver opened her door, but she didn't move. After a long moment, she opened her eyes. They were completely clear, without a trace of intoxication. She got out of the car without waiting for me and walked straight inside. I jumped out and followed. We went all the way to her bedroom. She closed the door, shutting out the rest of the world. She leaned her back against the door and slowly slid down to the floor. I didn't approach, just sat a few feet away, watching her. Her head was bowed, her long hair falling forward to hide her face. Then I heard a very quiet voice. Fergus, if only you were a person. My heart skipped a beat. Juliana started spending more time just looking at me, her gaze filled with something I couldn't decipher. It was no longer complete emptiness, nor was it the simple affection one has for a pet. It was something more complex, a focus that felt almost like an investigation. She started doing strange things. She would take her tablet, pull up documentaries, Planet Earth, nature shows, even simple educational programs for children, place in front of me, and then watch my reaction. I did my best to act like a normal, intelligent dog, interested but ultimately uncomprehending. Sometimes she would frown, other times she'd look thoughtful. She also got me puzzle toys, those complicated contraptions that required pushing, pulling, and sliding panels to get a treat. I was terrible at them, intentionally clumsy. She would watch me make a mess of the toy without getting angry. Instead, she'd let out a low chuckle, solve the puzzle herself, and hold the treat out to me. "Idiot," she'd say, a faint smile in her eyes. My heart felt like it was being gently squeezed. I had to keep reminding myself, "Leo, this is a mission. She's looking through you at something else, and you're exploiting her loneliness. It's a transaction. Don't take it seriously." But the word transaction felt hollow and dishonest. What I needed was that "I love you," and then to leave. What she needed was maybe just a companion that wouldn't betray her, even if that companion was a monster, a charlatan in a dog's body with ulterior motives. One afternoon, she was in her study handling paperwork. I was dozing on the rug at her feet. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, casting stripes of light and shadow across her. She was completely focused when she worked, her jawline tight, her profile almost ethereal in the haze of light. The air was still, broken only by the soft rustle of her turning a page or the faint scratch of her pen. I suddenly felt that this moment was peaceful, impossibly peaceful. If I ignored my current form, ignored the damn system in my head, this was almost a warm picture. Just then, her phone, lying on the desk, began to vibrate. She glanced at it but didn't answer. The phone buzzed stubbornly. Finally, looking annoyed, she picked it up and answered without speaking. The voice on the other end was faint but audible, a man, his tone agitated, seeming to demand something. Juliana's expression grew colder by the second. "My business is none of your concern," she cut him off, her voice like ice. The man said something else. She was silent for a few seconds, then gave a humorless smile. "That's right. He's my life. So stop getting ideas about him." She hung up abruptly, placing the phone face down on the desk. Her chest rose and fell slightly. She was clearly angry. She stared down, her fingers tapping unconsciously on the desktop, before her head turned toward me. The moment our eyes met, I saw it clearly, a frigid, obsessive emotion swirling in their depths. But as her gaze locked with mine, that emotion was forcibly suppressed, sinking back in what looked like a pool of calm, deep water. She beckoned to me. I got up and walked over. She knelt, wrapping her arms around me and pressing her face against the top of my head. "Don't be scared," she whispered, her words coming out a bit fast, as if she were trying to convince both me and herself. "No one can take you away from me. No one." Her arms tightened, filled with an undeniable possessiveness. That fragile peace I'd felt moments ago was shattered. In its place was a cold clarity and a sliver of indescribable panic. The mission. I had to finish the mission. Soon. The thought had never been so clear or urgent. I couldn't let myself drown in this twisted peace. Juliana's world was dangerous, her affection a poisonous vine. The longer it wrapped around me, the harder it would be to break free. I started to try harder. I worked to be the perfect dog, utterly devoted and empathetic. When she was down, I'd nudge her hand with my head. When she woke from a rare nightmare, I would immediately be there for her to touch. When she spoke of vague, unhappy childhood memories, I would lie still, listening with my entire being. My responses seemed to work. The light in her eyes focused on me more and more often. That intensity sometimes felt like I was being burned. Sometimes she would talk to me for hours, saying things she would never tell another soul. The dirty tactics at her company, the fake concern of her relatives, her uncertainty about the future, and the fear buried so deep she probably wouldn't admit it to herself, the fear of dying alone. She'd say, "Fergus, if you were gone too, what would I do?" I couldn't answer, so I'd just lick her hand. She would smile then, a smile sadder than tears. The time was almost right. I could feel it. Her dependence on me had reached a critical point. That cold, protective shell she wore had cracked open in front of me. I just needed one final push. As if on cue, the system chimed in with a cold reminder. Host has used 2/3 of the allotted mission time. Please proceed accordingly. Screw you, system, I thought, but my body knew what to do. Juliana had a habit. When the pressure became extreme, she would drink alone. Not out at a bar, but on the small balcony off her bedroom. She never drank much, but she was a lightweight. When she was drunk, she wasn't disruptive. She just became quieter than usual, her gaze distant, her reactions slow. Like a cat that had retracted all its claws to reveal its soft underbelly. It was an odd comparison for her, but the unguarded vulnerability was real. I waited a few days, and finally, the moment came. She returned home late, weighed down by exhaustion and the heavy scent of scotch. Mrs. Gable tried to help her up the stairs, but she gently pushed her away. "I'm fine," she slurred. "You can go." She didn't turn on the main lights, using only the dim glow from the hallway to make her way upstairs and into the bedroom. I followed at her heels. She didn't go to shower, walking straight to the balcony. There was a single armchair out there, and next to it, a small ice bucket with a bottle and a glass. She sat down, expertly poured a drink, and downed it in one go. Then another. The moonlight was bright, casting a silvery glow on her. She curled up in the chair, hugging her knees, staring at the dark silhouette of the mountains in the distance. I walked over and lay on the rug at her feet. She looked down at me, silent, and reached out a hand to stroke my head. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of the garden below. She had 3 or 4 glasses, her movements slowing down. "Fergus." She called my name, her voice thick. I looked up. Her eyes were bright in the moonlight, glistening with a drunken haze. A flush had risen on her cheeks, chasing away her usual icy pallor and giving her a startlingly vivid beauty. She stared at me for a long, long time. Then, she slowly leaned forward, resting her forehead against the top of my head. Her warm breath ghosted through my fur. I held my breath, waiting. The seconds ticked by, each one stretching into an eternity. Just as I thought she was about to fall asleep, I heard her say, in a voice that was barely a whisper, like a sigh, "I love you." My heart stopped. But then, as if in a dream, she added the last part. "You're all I have." The system's cold voice exploded in my head without warning. Keyword detected. Conditions met. Mission complete. Submit for immediate return. Note: upon submission, a 10-minute preparation window will commence. Return will be mandatory and irreversible after 10 minutes. I was stunned. It was done. Just like that. It was done. There was no sense of relief, no joy. For a moment, my mind was just white noise. I instinctively looked at Juliana. She was still in the same position, her forehead pressed against mine, her eyes closed, long lashes casting small shadows on her cheeks. Her breathing was even. She seemed to have drifted into a hazy state between drunk and asleep. The moonlight outlined a soft curve of her profile. In this moment, she looked completely harmless, almost childlike in her reliance. "You're all I have." Those words were like a tiny needle, pricking me with a delayed, sharp pang of guilt. But that pain was quickly drowned out by a much stronger impulse. Go home. I had to go home. Back to my real world, back to my life, however boring it was. What was the alternative? Stay here and be a dog forever? Live in a fictional story, trapped by Juliana's obsessive, heavy love? No. My hands trembling, I made the choice in my mind. Submit. Requesting return. Request received. Countdown initiated. 600 seconds. Host, please prepare. The return process may cause minor discomfort. 10 minutes. I only had 10 minutes. I shifted slightly, moving out from under Juliana's forehead. She didn't wake, just frowned and mumbled something, her hand unconsciously reaching out as if to grab something. I took a step back, avoiding her touch. She stayed curled in the chair, her hand hovering in the air for a moment before falling limp. I gave her one last look. The moonlight, the balcony, her sleeping form. Then I turned, and without looking back, I trotted out of the bedroom, down the stairs, and into a deserted corner of this massive, cold, empty mansion. I hid behind a heavy curtain, waiting in silence. The seconds ticked away. In my head, the system's countdown continued its cold march. 10, 9, 8. I closed my eyes. 3, 2, 1. Return initiated. A powerful, disorienting wave of vertigo hit me. Everything in front of me, the light, the colors, the texture of the curtain, twisted, stretched, and then dissolved into pure white. Then darkness, and an unbearable headache. For ugh, I groaned, my eyes flying open. My vision was blurry, taking a long moment to focus. I was staring at the blessedly familiar ceiling of my bedroom, a yellow water stain in the corner, shaped like an ugly mushroom. Beneath me was a hard mattress with sagging springs. The air was thick with the smell of greasy cooking from the next apartment and the faint, ever-present scent of dampness from my own room. I was back. I was really back. My heart hammered against my ribs, whether from the after effects of the return or something else. I couldn't tell. I pushed myself up, looking around. The cramped spare room in a shared Brooklyn apartment. Less than 100 square feet, crammed with a bed, a wardrobe, and a desk, leaving almost no room to walk. The desk was cluttered with empty ramen cups, a half-drunk bottle of water, and messy stacks of paper. Outside the window, the sky was a dreary gray. It looked like late afternoon. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand. The screen lit up with the date and time. It was just a few hours after I had collapsed at the bodega. Almost no time had passed here. But in that other world, I had been there for months. Was it all just a crazy, vivid dream? The dizziness and dull ache in my head were still there. I scrubbed my face hard with my hands. The skin was warm, the sensation real. It wasn't a dream. All of it. And her, it was all real. Juliana. The name surfaced, and my chest felt like it had been gently but firmly struck. How is she now? Has she realized I'm gone? Will she look for me? The thought had barely formed before I pinched myself hard. Get it together, Leo. You're back. This is your world. Everything over there, Juliana, the Thorne estate, Fergus the Doberman. It was a mission, an accident, a story in a book. It's over. It's all over. I took a deep breath, trying to force down the strange, heavy feeling in my chest. My stomach rumbled, a powerful hunger reminding me of my grim reality. That ramen cup I never got to eat. I got out of bed, my feet unsteady on the cold floor. I went to the tiny kitchen, boiled water, and tore open a packet of instant beef ramen. I watched the noodle bricks slowly soften in the boiling water, the familiar, cheap smell of the seasoning packet filling the air. A taste I once found bland now smelled like solid, grounding reality. I carried the bowl back to my room, sat in my creaky chair, and devoured it. The hot broth slowly warmed my body. My phone buzzed. A message from my work group chat. My boss was asking about a project's progress, tagging everyone. I put down my fork and stared at the blinking text on the screen. A familiar, suffocating wave of annoyance washed over me. The endless reports, the pointless meetings, the draining office politics, and the number in my bank account that was never enough. This was my life, mundane, exhausting, and with no end in sight. A world away from Juliana's, luxurious, cold, but a world that had, for brief moments, held a strange kind of warmth. I almost laughed. Humans are pathetic. When I was there, I dreamed of coming back. Now that I'm back, I'm already making comparisons. Stop thinking about it. I forced my attention back to the ramen, to the group chat, to this real and unforgiving world. After I finished, I tossed the bowl in the sink, opened my laptop, and started tackling my backed-up work. My fingers tapped on the keyboard, mechanically replying to emails, editing a PowerPoint. But my mind kept drifting. Flashes of Juliana on the balcony, bathed in moonlight. The way she trembled when she buried her face in my neck. The unervingly focused way she would look at me. And that final moment, her hand reaching, then falling limp in the air. I shook my head violently and took a long drink of the cold water beside me. Calm down, Leo. It was just a hyper-realistic dream. Now you're awake. For the next few days, I try my best to slip back into Leo Carter's life. I went to work on time, 4 smiles from my boss and coworkers, and came home to order takeout or eat more ramen. I scrolled through mindless videos on my phone and fell into a fitful sleep amid the noise from my roommates. Life seemed to be back on its old track. Dull, tiring, numb, but I knew something had changed. I would wake up in the middle of the night with a jolt, thinking I was still on that ridiculously soft bed at the Thorne estate, with the sound of someone else's quiet breathing beside me. I'd stare at my greasy takeout and involuntarily think of the beautifully plated filet mignon and blueberries in that exquisite bowl. Once, walking past a pet shop, I saw a Doberman in the window and stopped dead in my tracks. My heart seized as if gripped by an invisible hand, and I couldn't breathe. I practically ran away. I became more withdrawn. At the office, I avoided conversation. Back at the apartment, I locked myself in my room. My roommates probably thought I was weird, but no one asked. In a city like this, everyone's a little weird. Until that night. It was another late one at the office. I dragged my exhausted body home to a dark apartment. My roommates were likely asleep. I didn't turn on the overhead light, just the dim lamp on my desk. I shed my jacket and collapsed into my chair, not wanting to move. Hunger gnawed at me again. Too lazy to boil more water, I picked up the cold, half-eaten sandwich left over from lunch and began mechanically stuffing it into my mouth. The dry bread scraped my throat. As I was forcing it down, my phone, lying on the desk, started vibrating uncontrollably. It wasn't a call. It was a flood of text notifications, one after another, so rapid it was alarming. Who would be texting me this late? Work? Not unless the world was ending. Frowning, I picked up the phone. The lock screen was lit up, flooded with a stream of notifications. But at the very top was a text message preview from an unsaved number. No words, just a thumbnail image. I froze. A deeply unsettling premonition slithered up my spine like an icy snake. I unlocked the phone and opened the message. The picture loaded. It was crystal clear, taken from outside a bodega. It was me in a gray hoodie and jeans, head down as I pushed the door open, a bottle of water in my hand. The background was the familiar streetscape, the neon signs reflecting blurrily on the glass door. The timestamp was from tonight. I'd stopped to buy water on my way home from work. Who took this? Was someone following me? A chill shot from my feet to the top of my head. My fingers were trembling as I scrolled down. Beneath the picture were 2 lines of text. The first, found you. 2 simple words, but they felt like poison-tipped icicles driving straight into my eyes. My blood seemed to freeze in my veins. I stared at the text, my mind roaring with a single, blank thought. Impossible. This is impossible. Just then, a ping announced the arrival of a second text. My dog has been gone for 3 years. It's time to come home. Tell me, would breaking your legs make you behave, or would a leash be more effective? Every word burned like a red-hot brand on my retinas, searing itself into my nerves. My breathing stopped. All the blood rushed to my head, then drained away in an instant, leaving my limbs cold and numb. 3 years. Been gone for 3 years. Breaking your legs. A leash. Those words, coupled with that familiar, cold, and obsessive tone. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Was this a prank? Who would pull such a sick joke? Overwhelming fear and a sense of the absurd seized me, making it hard to even hold the phone. I shot to my feet, the legs of my chair screeching against the floor. Staring at the unknown number, my fingers shaking uncontrollably, I hit dial. The line rang a long, monotonous tone in my ear. Each ring hammered on my nerves, which were stretched to their absolute limit. Pick up. Pick up. Tell me this is fake. A scam. The ringing stopped. The call was answered. But the other end was silent, save for the faint, quiet hum of static. I held my breath, my throat too dry to make a sound. A few seconds of dead silence passed, and then I heard it. That voice, coming through the phone, slightly distorted, but with a magnetic quality, laced with a barely there, chilling smile that seemed to tap directly on my eardrum. Hello. It was just one word, but it was as if all the strength was instantly drained from my body. My knees buckled, and I nearly collapsed, saved only by a death grip on the edge of my desk. That cold, familiar voice, carved into my very bones. Juliana. It was really her. She let out another low chuckle. It was quiet, but it made every hair on my body stand on end. Then, I heard her say, slowly and deliberately, in an almost gentle tone, "Bark for me." My teeth started chattering uncontrollably. The person on the other end seemed to be savoring my terrified silence. She paused for 2 beats before leisurely adding the final line. Her tone was still soft, but it held the cruel, playful confidence of a cat toying with a mouse. Or, do you want me? 5. The dial tone that followed felt like a death sentence. I stood in the dim room, phone in hand, my blood run cold. Found you. She was here. She had followed me from that world to this one. I bolted to the window, yanking aside the old curtain. The street below was empty, lit only by the sickly white glow of the streetlights on the wet pavement. No black sedan, no bodyguards in suits, nothing. But I knew she was out there, watching me, just as she had for the last 3 years. No, just as she had every single day in that other world, with that silent, inescapable gaze. It's time to come home. Home? What home? That cage built of gold and loneliness. A tidal wave of fury surged through me, mixed with the terror and humiliation I had suppressed for 3 long years. I was done. Done with being a dog, done with living in fear, done with being pinned by her possessive stare. I was a goddamn person. I grabbed my jacket, threw open the door, and sprinted outside. The night air cut on my face like a knife, but it felt clarifying. Run. Don't let her catch you. Never. I tore down a familiar street, my heart hammering in my chest, unable to tell if it was from fear or rage. Rounding a corner, I skidded to a halt. Standing under a streetlight was a figure. A long black coat made her skin look impossibly pale, like moonlight. The night wind gently stirred her long hair. She stood perfectly still, a slender cigarette held between her fingers, its red ember glowing in the dark. She lifted her eyes and looked at me. From 50 feet away, I could see with perfect clarity that her light-colored eyes held no surprise, no anger, only a deep, bottomless, chilling calm. As if my escape, my panic, my every reaction was something she had already anticipated. She even curled the corner of her lip slightly. It wasn't a smile. It was the look of a hunter watching its prey walk right into the trap. I spun around, about to bolt in the other direction. Now, her voice wasn't loud. It was almost soft, but it wrapped around my ankles like an invisible rope, stopping me in my tracks. She knew my name, my real name, from this world. A chill crawled up my spine, vertebra by vertebra, freezing me solid. Stiffly, I turned back around. She had already stubbed out the cigarette and was walking toward me, one step at a time. The click of her heels on the pavement was unnervingly clear in the silent night. The rhythm was unhurried, yet every step seemed to land directly on my nerves. She stopped right in front of me, so close. So close I could smell that familiar, cool fragrance on her, now mingled with a faint trace of tobacco. She was thinner than I remembered, her jawline sharper, her gaze deeper, so deep you couldn't see the bottom. 3 years. For her, it had been a real, agonizing 3 years of searching and waiting. She raised her hand, her cool fingers gently touching my cheek. I flinched violently, trying to pull away, but her fingers slid down to my jaw, her grip firming, forcing me to lift my head and meet her eyes. "Why run?" she asked, her voice flat. "Do you really think you can get away?" I opened my mouth, but my throat was dust. No sound came out. My chest heaved, rage and fear warring in my blood. "Speak," she commanded, the pressure of her fingertips increasing. "Have you gone mute in 3 years?" Or she leaned in, her breath ghosting over my lips, her voice dropping to a low, mocking whisper. "Have you forgotten how to do anything but bark?" That was the spark that lit the fuse. "Let go of me." I shoved her hand away, my voice raw. "Juliana, are you insane? Look at me. I'm a person. I'm not your dog." I screamed the words, and they echoed harshly in the empty street. She didn't react to being pushed, just watched me quietly, taking my rage-flushed face, my ragged breathing. Her expression was like someone observing a pet that had been lost and found, only to throw a tantrum. Beneath the calm was a terrifying obsession. "A person," she repeated the word softly, as if it were amusing. Then, she took one small step forward. It was enough to back me completely against a cold, brick wall. My back hit the rough surface. There was nowhere left to run. She braced her arm against the wall next to my head, trapping me in a narrow, suffocating cage of her own making. Her cool fragrance was overpowering now, enveloping me completely. What I raise is mine. Her gaze dropped to my lips, then slowly traveled back up to lock with my eyes. "Dog, person, what's the difference? If it runs away, you catch it. If it misbehaves, she paused, her other hand coming up to my neck, her thumb gently stroking my throat. You lock it up until it learns to listen. Her tone was as casual as if she were discussing the weather, but the words plunged me into an icy abyss. What gives you the right? My teeth were chattering, from cold or fear, I didn't know. The right comes from searching for you for 3 years. She cut me off, her voice finally showing the faintest tremor, like a current under ice. Over 1,000 days, Leo. I turned every world you could have possibly gone to upside down. Her forehead gently pressed against mine. Our breaths mingled, inescapable. You tell me what gives me the right. I was stunned, staring into her eyes so close to my own. They were no longer just cold. They churned with a ferocious emotion that threatened to swallow me whole. Pain, obsession, madness, and something deeper I couldn't comprehend. Come back with me, she said in a low voice. It was a command, yet it held a barely perceptible note of pleading. No. I squeezed the word out from between clenched teeth. Her eyes darkened. The next second, without any warning, she kissed me. It wasn't a gentle touch. It was a siege, a conquest reeking of gunpowder, the violent eruption of emotion suppressed for far too long. Her cool, soft lips crushed against mine, prying my teeth apart, delving inside with no room for refusal. Her scent, that cool fragrance mixed with tobacco, instantly overwhelmed all my senses. My mind went blank. All I could register was the searing, almost painful friction of our lips and tongues. She was trembling. It was faint, but I could feel it. This woman who seemed to have everything under control, so terrifyingly calm, was shaking as she kissed me, like a string pulled taut for too long that had finally snapped. My hands, which had been pushing against her, froze in midair. The fire of my anger was still burning, but this sudden, violent intimacy, and her hidden tremor, doused it with a bucket of ice water. It hissed, sending up a cloud of confused steam. Her kiss gradually lost its bruising force, becoming more of a desperate, almost greedy exploration. As if she were trying to confirm I was real, that I was truly caught, right here within her grasp. She only pulled back slightly when I started to go limp from lack of oxygen, resting her forehead against mine, both of us breathing hard. Her eyelashes were wet. Leo, she said, her voice hoarse, using my name, not Fergus. I missed you. I missed you so much I thought I would go insane. The simple words were like a blunt knife, slowly carving through my armor. I looked at her reddened eyes, at the raw, undisguised possession and longing that threatened to burn us both to the ground. And deep inside it all, a tiny, faint flicker of terror, the fear of being abandoned again. Suddenly, I understood. She hadn't come looking for her dog. She had come to catch a thief who had stolen all her warmth and her sleep. A pathetic, hateful, but maddeningly missed thief named Leo. My hands, still weak, remained in the air. I didn't push her away. Instead, I balled them into fists and grabbed the front of her expensive, cool coat. Hard. Juliana. I was panting too, my voice raspy and unrecognizable. I'm not a dog. Her body stiffened slightly. I stared in her eyes, and, word by word, I yelled everything that had been buried in my heart for 3 years, or rather, across 2 worlds. Look at me. I'm a person. I run, I jump, I curse. I'm a regular guy who needs to eat and sleep and make rent. I'm not some pet you can summon and dismiss whenever you want. And all that crap about breaking my legs and locking me up, who are you trying to scare? If you got the guts, then kill me right now. See if I'll go back with you then. I yelled it all in one breath, my chest heaving, my eyes burning as I glared at her. She was stunned. She probably hadn't expected this reaction. Not pleading, not terrified submission, but a full-blown explosion like a firecracker going off in her face. She stared at me, and the icy shell in her light-colored eyes began to crack, revealing a genuine, bewildered shock underneath. Then, that shock was slowly consumed by another, more intense emotion. Not anger. It was a strange, almost feverish interest. She suddenly leaned closer again, her nose almost touching mine. Keep talking, she commanded, a new tension in her voice. Tell me who you really are. I had nothing left to lose. Leo Carter, 26, a corporate drone, 4 figures in my bank account. I live in that dump right there. I like video games and bad movies. I eat instant ramen and can't afford to add an egg. I'm scared of the dark, scared of being alone, and even more scared of psychos like you. Happy now. I finished, gasping for air like a fish out of water. She didn't speak, just stared at me, her gaze like a hook, trying to strip me bare from the inside out. Time seemed to freeze. The night wind swept through the empty street. Then I heard a quiet sound. She laughed. Not a cold, mocking laugh. A real, low, and genuinely pleased laugh that rumbled in her throat. She raised her hand and used the pad of her thumb to wipe away the tear that had escaped my eye, whether from rage or something else, didn't know. The gesture wasn't gentle, it was almost rough. But her eyes were blazing, like two wildfires suddenly igniting in the quiet night sky. Leo Carter. She said my name again, her tongue rolling over the syllables as if savoring a new flavor. Turns out you, with your claws out, she paused, the heat in her eyes making my heart stutter, are much prettier than when you wag your tail. For some reason, all my righteous, take no prisoner's fury just fizzled out. My hands, still clutching her coat, were stuck. I didn't know whether to tighten my grip or let go. I just stood there, frozen, staring into her eyes. The wildfire in them hadn't died down, but something else was mixing with it, making my head spin. A gust of wind made me shiver. She noticed, her brow furrowing almost imperceptibly. The next thing I knew, she was shrugging off her own ridiculously expensive black coat and, without a word, wrapping it snugly around me. It was still warm from her body and carried her scent. I'm not cold. I mumbled stubbornly into the collar. I am, she said, her expression unchanged. She slid her arms under the coat and wrapped them firmly around my waist, pulling me into her soft, warm embrace. This is warmer. What kind of twisted logic was that? I wanted to pull away, but the coat was impossibly warm, and the heat radiating from her body was even more so. A shameful craving for that warmth seeped into my frozen bones. Just for a minute, just to get warm. I didn't move, letting her hold me. We stood there like two idiots on a deserted street corner in the middle of the night, huddled together inside a single coat. Her chin rested lightly on the top of my head, her breath warming my ear. Leo, she said suddenly, her voice low in the quiet night. Come home with me. There was again, but the tone was different. Less of that suffocating control, more of something else. I didn't answer. She waited a few seconds, then her arms tightened slightly. Not a cage, she added, the words coming out a bit rushed, as if trying to convince herself. Our home. It'll have your game consoles, a pantry filled with ramen. And she hesitated, seeming to search her memory for the details of Leo that I'd just screamed at her. You can have 2 eggs. For some stupid reason, my nose started to sting. This woman. I don't want to be a dog, I said, burying my face in her shoulder. My voice was muffled but firm. Her body seemed to freeze for an instant. Then, I felt a slight vibration in her chest. A quiet laugh. Okay, she said, patting my back. The motion was a little clumsy, but ridiculously earnest. You can be the boss. Really? I lifted my head, eyeing her suspiciously. She looked down, her gaze meeting mine, deep and steady. I searched for you for 3 years, she said slowly, as if weighing each word. I wasn't trying to get a well-behaved dog back. She paused. Asshole. She bit off the last word softly. It was like a sigh, like a curse of resignation. It landed on my heart, heavy and hot. So she knew all along. The little things I thought I'd hidden so well, those clumsy, human attempts to comfort and connect with her. She knew. She looked at me, her eyes shining, reflecting the streetlights and my own stunned face. So, Leo, she ducked her head, her forehead pressing against mine, the tip of her nose brushing against mine, our breaths tangling together again. Come home with me and be my boss. I've got your back. You can have all the money in the world. If the sky falls, I'll hold it up. The words were so cheesy, so over the top. But coming from her, they carried an undeniable sincerity. I looked into her eyes, which reflected a tiny, pathetic version of me. That last bit of resistance, that pitiful pride and fear belonging to Leo Carter, melted away like the last patch of snow in the sun. To hell with dignity. To hell with fear. For the past 26 years, I'd lived like a loser, always sucking up to people, bowing and scraping for a paycheck. Now, I had a gorgeous, impossibly rich heiress who was apparently blind enough to want me, begging me to come back and be her king. What was I being so difficult for? I sniffled, wiping my face messily with the back of my hand. Then, with all the strength I had, I hugged her back, fiercely. I buried my face deep in the cool, fragrant curve of her neck. You better mean it. My voice was impossibly hoarse, muffled against her skin. Her body shuddered, and then she hugged me back even harder. Her arms were so tight they hurt, as if she were trying to merge me into her bones. I do. Her voice came from above my head, with a tremor she couldn't hide. Cross my heart. There in her arms, I broke into a wide, silent grin. But damn it, the tears wouldn't stop, and I smeared them all over her neck. She didn't move, just let me. After a while, when I had calmed down, she loosened her hold slightly and looked down at me. Home, she asked, her fingers brushing away the damp tracks on my cheeks. I looked at her, holding her gaze for several long seconds. Then I took a deep breath, as if trying to exhale the pathetic old Leo for good. When I spoke again, my voice was still a bit nasal, but it was loud and clear. I'm starving, I said. Let's eat first, and I want the most expensive thing on the menu. She blinked, stunned for a moment. Then, the last traces of frost in her eyes melted completely, replaced by a genuine, radiant smile. It was a small smile, but it was dazzling. All right, she said, leading me by the hand toward the end of the street. Whatever you want. I felt a little guilty. Was I pushing my luck? Whatever. Don't look a gift horse in the mouth. The wind was still blowing, but it didn't feel as cold anymore. Juliana, I called out, my voice muffled. You serious about having my back? I am. You're so annoying. I know. We walked, talking pointless nonsense. The street was empty, the world so quiet it felt like we were the only two people in it. The car was waiting at the corner, just as I'd expected. Sleek, black, and obviously expensive. She opened the door for me. I climbed in. The heat was on full blast, and the leather seats were as soft as clouds. She got in beside me, closed the door, and gave the driver the name of a restaurant. It was one of those places I'd only ever seen online, where the price per person was astronomical. The car pulled smoothly into the sparse late-night traffic. I watched the familiar yet alien city lights streak past the window. The empty space that had been in my chest for so long was slowly being filled with something warm. I secretly reached out my hand, fumbling on the seat between us. My fingers brushed against hers. They were cool to the touch. I hesitated for a moment, then opened my hand and, a bit clumsily, wrapped it around hers. I held on tight. Her body tensed for a second, then relaxed. Her fingers shifted, turning to lace through mine. There was only soft music in the car, and the sound of her breathing gradually falling into sync. The car stopped in front of a towering skyscraper. My feet hit the polished marble floor. I looked at the glittering palace-like entrance, then down at my own wrinkled hoodie and jeans. I puffed out my chest. I'm the boss now. The boss looks good in anything. She led me by the hand, past a maitre d' in a tuxedo who bowed respectfully, through a lobby so quiet you could hear her footsteps, and into a private elevator that went straight to the top floor. The elevator ascended silently, its mirrored walls reflecting our images. She stood tall and elegant, her profile flawless in the soft light, though the tips of her ears were a little red. And me, my hair a mess from the wind, my eyes still a bit puffy, but holding her hand, standing up straight. Like a thug who had crashed a fairy tale. The elevator doors opened. The entire floor was empty. A single table by the window was set for two, with candles, flowers, and fine china. Beyond the massive floor-to-ceiling windows lay the glittering, sleeping galaxy of the city. She pulled out my chair for me. I sat down, watching the flickering candlelight in her face softened by the warm glow. Juliana, I said, this place, I gestured around us. Did you book the whole thing? Yes, she said, taking a sip of water. I didn't want anyone to bother you while you eat. Stay there. She met my gaze, her expression calm, as if booking out the top floor of a five-star restaurant was as simple as buying a bottle of water. That last bit of insecurity and awkwardness belonging to poor old Leo Carter suddenly vanished. In its place was a strange sense of peace and an urge to laugh. All right, I picked up the menu, which had no prices, flipped through a couple of pages, and pointed at a few of the most ridiculously fancy-looking dishes. This, and this. I pushed the menu toward her, leaned back, and sank comfortably into the plush chair. Then I looked up, met her gaze, and grinned, a smile that could probably be described as arrogant. That's for starters. Honey, you're paying. The last three words were clear, confident, and utterly shameless. Juliana's hand, holding her water glass, froze mid-air. She stared at me, the candlelight dancing in her pale eyes, reflecting a tiny, smug version of me. Time seemed to stop for a few seconds. Then I saw the usual coolness and composure in her eyes ripple, shatter, and finally converge into a surging, scalding light. She put down her glass, the base making a soft, crisp sound against the table. She didn't speak. She just picked up the small service bell next to her and pressed it. A waiter appeared noiselessly. She took the menu I'd pushed toward her, didn't even glance at it, and spoke. Her voice was steady, but it carried a strange, taut energy. Get him what he ordered. Yes, Miss Thorne. The waiter bowed and retreated. She turned her gaze back to me, locking onto me from across the flickering candles. What did you just call me? She asked, her voice a little deeper than before. Do not interfere with the main plot. Please follow your predetermined destiny. Juliana was making coffee. The silver spoon in her hand tapped the porcelain cup with a soft clink. She looked up, her gaze directed at the empty air. Her focus was so precise it felt like she could pierce through dimensions and see the frantic stream of data. Who's speaking? She asked, her tone terrifyingly calm. I am the narrative of this world, tasked with maintaining the story's operation. The narrative was scared, but it tried to sound authoritative. Story. Juliana stirred her coffee slowly. Was my Fergus also a part of your story? The vessel Fergus was an anomalous data fragment generated by a plot deviation. It was an illegal variable intrusion from another dimension, a human named Leo Carter. He has been purged according to regulations. The narrative explained hurriedly. Please focus on the main plot and your destined partner. Purge, Juliana interrupted. She stopped stirring. The coffee cup was placed gently back on its saucer. She stood up and walked to the massive window, looking down at the city of ants below. Bring him back to me, she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried a chill that seemed to freeze the narrative's core code. The variable has been purged and cannot be restored. Please accept reality. The narrative insisted, stealing itself. Juliana smiled, a very soft smile. But the narrative detected a timeline tremor 1,000,000 times more violent than when the male lead was going bankrupt. Fine, she said. Then, she picked up the internal phone on her desk and dialed a number. Her tone was as calm as if she were commenting on the weather. It's me. The assets we prepared. It's time to liquidate. Yes, the Prescotts. I want them completely erased, in every sense of the word. No, stop. The narrative screamed in her mind. Its data stream a torrent of red alerts. The death of the protagonist will cause the dimension to collapse. All existence will be annihilated, including you. Juliana looked at her reflection in the glass and smoothed her cuff. Oh, she replied. Then she tilted her head slightly, directing a gentle smile toward the void. But her eyes were both insane and lucid, like a dying star erupting in its final, most brilliant burst of light. Perfect, she said. He can pay for my dog. The narrative completely broke down. It had run for eons, maintained countless stories, and never encountered a bug like this. No, this wasn't a bug. This was a virus threatening to drag the entire world down with it into mutual destruction. This was a catastrophe named obsession, more terrifying than any demon from the abyss. It couldn't let her kill the protagonist, but it had no way of stopping this woman who clearly no longer cared about her own existence. In that instant, the narrative's logic module ran trillions of calculations. Every single one pointed to the same outcome, annihilation. Unless it gave her what she wanted. Stop. I'll tell you the truth. The narrative's voice was practically weeping. All of it. Juliana's finger, hovering over the button to end the call, paused. Speak. Shaking, the narrative spilled the deepest secrets of the world's design. about the transmigration, the mission, about how Leo Carter came from a completely real and separate dimension where time flowed differently. So he wasn't purged. He just completed his mission and went back. Juliana seized on the key detail. Igriegagis. According to the rules, the variable returns to its origin point, its trajectory erased. There should be no further connection to this world. Send me there, Juliana said without a moment's hesitation. Impossible. The narrative shrieked. The dimensional barrier cannot be crossed. The rules forbid it. You'll be torn apart by temporal turbulence. Even if you survive the journey, the fundamental laws of the two worlds are different. You might not be able to exist there. Juliana picked up the phone again. Wait. Be rational. The narrative was about to fracture. Is it worth it? For someone who deceived you, used you, and left you without a second thought the moment his mission was done. He wasn't even a real dog or a person from your world. Everything he did was an act. Juliana was silent for a moment. The bright sun fell on her long lashes. I know, she said suddenly, her voice very soft, but unnaturally clear. She paused. He didn't even look back. I know all of it. The narrative couldn't understand. Then why? Why? Juliana repeated, looking out at the vast sky, her gaze seeming to pierce the clouds and reach for some unknown shore. Because in here, she pointed to the left side of her chest. From the first time, he clumsily nudged my hand with his head. From the time he secretly licked away my tears. The door never closed again. What he is, where he came from, why he came, it doesn't matter. What matters, she turned her head, her gaze once again seeming to see the formless rules, is where he is, and that I will have him. The narrative's alarms blared at their highest level. Its logic module, caught between certain destruction and potential destruction, trembling, chose the latter. Even if you'll be rejected by that world, even if your very existence there will be an error, even if you might never be able to return, it made one last, desperate attempt. Juliana answered with only 3 words. Send me there. Her tone was flat but absolute, filled with an unshakable resolve. The narrative, the supreme rule of this world, after a long silence, emitted a sound like a sigh, a mixture of helplessness, fear, and a hint of resignation. The vast, formless rules began to twist and converge. A door that no ordinary being could perceive began to tear open in front of Juliana. Beyond it was a chaotic swirl of turbulence and a soul-crushing void. Juliana looked at the door without a trace of fear. She simply straightened her clothes, as if she were heading to a casual appointment. Then, without hesitation, she stepped through. In the moment before the light consumed her, the narrative heard her leave one final, whispered message, filled with infinite coldness and the possessive, gentle satisfaction of finally getting her way. Tell the narrative of that world, don't touch him, or I'll devour it. The portal closed. In its core, the narrative's subroutine for fear quietly built itself layer upon layer of firewalls. Then it huddled in the void, pretending to be nothing more than a harmless cloud of background data. And on the other side of the universe, I, facing a bowl of ramen with 2 eggs, let out a loud sneeze. Who's talking about me? I mumbled, slurping up a mouthful of noodles. Completely unaware that my uneventful career as a dog had nearly taught a cosmic entity the true meaning of the word bark. Bonus chapter end.